everybody, you know, it's horse tranquilizer, which to me was PCP, but give us a history of A, where it came from, and B, how it got to sort of, you know, the ubiquity that it has now.
I mean, I can go deep.
Go.
You want to go deep? You want to know deep?
We got time. Let's go.
You want to go deep?
Okay. I want to go deep. Well, I want to get to the book, but I want to talk to that because that's a great story. But I just technically, we're starting with the sort of the overall science of it.
Well, I feel like I should go deep because one reason that I know so much is because of you.
Oh my Lord.
It's absolutely because of you. The one reason that I have been able to get so unbelievably deep into this stuff is because you gave me the opportunity to do it. So I'll go into it. The discovery of PCP was this watershed moment where, for the first time, there was an anesthetic that didn't cause respiratory depression. And this was a huge deal because in the past it was all Quaalude, barbiturate, opioid type things that basically kind of almost put you into a deep sleep coma type state. And suddenly there's this new type of drug. It actually seems to increase your blood pressure slightly, and yet you lose consciousness and have no sense.
Sorry, this is PCP or
PCP.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's this guy, Vic Maddox, and in the pilot of my show, I actually went to this graveyard where his body resides in Grand Forks, North Dakota, I believe, and laid a bouquet of flowers on his grave to thank him for this discovery. And interviewed his widow, who talked about his pride that the Queen of England gave her horse PCP, and this was like one of the things that he really cherished.
The Queen of England gave the horse PCP?
Yeah. And she gave me some of his poetry. He was a poet. Wow. Yeah, so I mean, all these things I know because of you. And so...
All these things I know.
And so this was a huge discovery, but there was a problem, which is that it lasted too long. It worked really well as an anesthetic, but people were out for too long, and when they would come out of it, they were all whacked out, and it took them too long to recover, and the pharmaceutical company that was developing this, Park Davis in Detroit, needed something that was rapidly metabolized.
Right.
And there was this chemist named Calvin Stevens at Wayne State University, and he was studying this rearrangement reaction with a group of people. Again, I actually reached out to some of these people while working on my show, so again, as a result of you. And I tracked down one of the co-authors on the original scientific publication that led to the discovery of ketamine. And
so hold on, ketamine came from PCP?
Essentially, it's in the same chemical class. It's not directly made from PCP, but it was part of this initiative to create drugs of this nature.
And both were tranquilizers.
Yeah, and one of the people that discovered ketamine, I was telling me about it. He'd never heard of ketamine, and I was like, oh, you should really look this up. Like, you worked on the discovery of this molecule that is now described by the World Health Organization as the most widely used anesthetic on Earth. And he responds to me and says, like, oh wow, that's very interesting. Like, I'll have to look into.
How does he not know?
I have no idea. I guess you could just be some guy working in a lab and you're just thinking like, oh, I'm looking at alpha ketone rearrangement reactions or whatever, and you don't know that this chemistry that you're doing would lead to.
So they basically rearranged PCP, it became K, and he's like, great, good work, goes home to have a beer, and then meanwhile it becomes K all over the world.
Yeah, so they discovered this thing and they developed it and they realized that ketamine solves a lot of the problems that PCP had. It's very rapidly metabolized, so instead of lasting for hours, you're in and out of ketamine in less than an hour. Right. And yeah, so it has a very high therapeutic index, very few people are allergic to it.
I'm gonna keep interrupting. What's the therapeutic index?
It's the ratio of the dose that has a therapeutic effect to the dose that has a toxic effect.
Oh, I see.
So some drugs have a very narrow therapeutic index, meaning that the dose that is therapeutic is very close to the toxic dose. An example would be, well, alcohol isn't exactly therapeutic, but a lot of opioids, for example, where if you take, or aspirin would be another, acetaminophen would be probably the best example, where you take 10 times the therapeutic dose of acetaminophen and you could severely damage your liver. So this was a drug that was very well tolerated, kind of like the perfect anesthetic in a lot of ways, and it did cause this weird hallucinatory effects, but so what, not a big deal, we can ignore that. And for a while, no one really talked about it. It was known that this drug did this thing and that the thing that it did was weird, but it wasn't being exploited by anyone for any non-medical purposes. But then that started to change dramatically in the 1970s.
Yeah, I remember it was very fringe. I remember mostly in the UK, you go to like, Glastonbury or whatever, and E was a big deal, and MDMA, and then all of a sudden I kept hearing about this K. Oh, the K is very lush, man. Everyone would sort of be in these K holes, and you're like, yeah, I don't want to go into a K hole, and it seemed scary. And then boom, it was everywhere. Not boom, but like in a decade.
Yeah.
What's the popularity? Why did it become like the ubiquitous drug?
Well, that I don't fully understand, because I think that in some sense it's the least social drug that you could possibly imagine.
Right.
It numbs touch. It makes movement difficult for many people. It makes communication extremely difficult. At higher doses, it makes you completely unconscious and unable to communicate. So it's not a drug that really makes sense to me as a social drug. It makes a lot of sense to me in our current climate as a sort of pandemic era drug, where everybody is isolated and disconnected and atomized and working remotely and afraid of each other and in the middle of campaigns of social separation of one kind or another and afraid of everything. And you take this drug and go entirely within yourself. It makes a huge amount of sense now, but as a
psyche.
Yeah, for our current culture, it seems like the perfect.
So let's talk about some of the new drug. Well, it's not new, but newish. K is now become super popular, and I want to talk about its use for like treating depression.
Yeah.
And then we talked a little bit, which I want to get into, about like MDMA for PTSD.
Yeah.
And you gave me a mind-opening lecture on 2CB. 2CB.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start. Or do we still have? We're going more deep on K first.
But we can talk about whatever.
Let's just salt and pepper it, if you will.
Okay.
Okay. So we got K. That becomes kind of like the party drug. Has some bad side of people, some dying. Not good.
It's not common for people to die, but it happens occasionally, especially in polysubstance overdoses.
Right.
the main issue with it is that people become kind of delusional when they're addicted to it.
Is it addictive?
Not in a classical sense, the way opioids are, but some people develop weird relationships with it where they use it constantly. It's not super common, but it definitely does happen.
Okay, so that gets married. So there's, now let's get into this because rave culture brought about like ecstasy. I've got to have a drink of water, liquid of death. Okay, it's Jake laughing, not very professional. K becomes popular. Yeah, E. So E is big, it's everywhere, and that sort of gets usurped by Molly MDMA. What, tell us the difference in what happened.
Molly, E, MDMA.
Oh.
You have this drug MDMA, and then it has a bunch of different slang terms.
MDMA started as a marital drug. How did it start?
The official story of it, it's really weird and it's not widely known. The closest thing to it that is published in a publicly available source, a few people know the true story of it, and it's sort of sensitive. The chemist involved doesn't wish for their name to be publicly known. I know their name, but the closest version of that story that you will find in the public sphere is in a recent book called I Feel Love by Rachel Neuer, where she gives a brief interview with the chemist who discovered it. And there's a very, very interesting backstory there that I would love to one day tell, but this chemist actually...
Why can't we tell it now?
Because I don't have permission to tell it, but Rachel Neuer was able to get a good bit of that story out, and it's interesting. And so this chemist was friends with another chemist named Alexander Shulgin, and he was the greatest psychedelic chemist who has ever lived, who has ever been the master of all masters. Yeah.
And who invented LSD?
Albert Hoffman.
Albert Hoffman.
Yeah.
And it was like a vegetable alkaloid or something?
It's in a fungus called ergot. It was not in a fungus called ergot, but it contained a related compound that could be converted to LSD.
And it was in where? Switzerland? Or?
Yeah, in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And Basel.
Basel.
Yeah.
Do you ever make a pilgrimage there?
No.
Should we?
I love Switzerland.
I love Switzerland. Yeah. Let's go to Basel.
That's fun.
Okay. So tell me about San Francisco. So is this when the hippies adopted? Is this early days, like 60s?
It's more like 70s. Right. I think that this is starting to happen, like early 70s.
Right.
And so this guy, Alexander Shulgin, is the ultimate greatest psychedelic chemistry master.
He's a chemist.
Yeah, he's a chemist who used to work at Dow, leaves Dow and builds a lab in his backyard and starts doing completely independent research, partially with money from the profit of a insecticide or a snail killer that he invented called Zectran. And he becomes one of the early investigators of these MDMA type compounds, and he's one of the first people to really realize that there's something special, because that in and of itself is actually something that you can't always know with certainty will happen, that someone will try a drug and recognize its potential. Maybe they just don't like it, maybe they don't take a high enough dose, maybe it makes them feel weird and they say it's not worth it, but he took it and recognized that there was something really interesting about it, that it was doing something that wasn't like other drugs. It had things that were kind of similar to amphetamine and maybe kind of similar to psychedelics in certain ways, but it was also its own thing. It was essentially its own new class of drug. And so he started showing other people this drug, and an underground community formed to use it psychotherapeutically. And there was a therapist named Leo Zeff who came out of retirement after trying it and dedicated the rest of his life to distributing it to other people.
Therapeutically for what?
Couples therapy, maybe some early versions of PTSD, maybe for the betterment of well people.
So now it's, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong anytime I say anything, but they're using it now for PTSD treatment.
They were trying, yeah. They were developing it for that purpose.
And?
This is a really long story, but they spent 40 years. So at the beginning, of course, like all drugs, it wasn't illegal. But then people started using it. It gained some popularity. The government decided to place it in Schedule 1, and there was a campaign to prevent that from happening. There's a guy, Rick Doblin, who was actually selling MDMA to pay for the legal defense to prevent it from being prohibited.
Right.
And all the experts came together for this massive battle at the DEA, debating whether or not people should be allowed to use MDMA medically. Everyone was more or less in agreement that it should be controlled in some way. The question was, does it get placed in Schedule 1, where there can be no medical use of it of any kind, or in a lower schedule, Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, where it's still restricted and controlled by the government, but physicians and scientists can access it more easily. This was the idea. And the DEA's own administrative law judge ruled that it should not be placed in Schedule 1, and the DEA ignored the ruling of their own judge.
Why?
Because they're prohibitionists that like to make drugs illegal.
So if they Schedule 1 it, then you can't even experiment on it, or...
A physician can no longer prescribe it. It becomes immensely difficult to give it to humans.
Right.
Immensely difficult. So the same guy, Rick Doblin, who was selling MDMA to pay to prevent it from being made illegal, embarks on a lifelong quest to find a way to introduce it into medicine. He starts essentially a pharmaceutical company, a nonprofit pharmaceutical company, and enters MDMA into clinical trials and spends decades getting this work to the point where it will be shown to the FDA. And this is kind of like the sum of his lifetime's efforts.
They done it?
Yeah. And there was a rejection.
No.
Yes. Yeah.
If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code SHANE, that's Shane, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Just make sure you use bonus code Shane when you sign up. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code Shane to get up to $1,500 first bet offer today. And so what's the difference between MDMA and MDA and Molly?
The difference between MDMA and MDA is the presence of a methyl group on the nitrogen atom, so it's like analogous to the relationship between amphetamine and methamphetamine.
What's the difference between amphetamine and methamphetamine?
Again, a methyl group on the nitrogen.
Yeah, but okay, but what's the,
there's actually much less.
methamphetamine to me is stronger than amphetamine.
Right, there's a lot, but a lot of that is cultural. It is slightly stronger, but not. I've tried both. I don't know that necessarily I can tell the difference between the two of them. They're very similar drugs, but the issue is that when we talk about drugs, it's so often a product of our cultural associations and the cost and the distribution networks surrounding certain drugs. So amphetamine and methamphetamine may be extremely similar, pharmacologically and chemically, but culturally, you have one that is prescribed to affluent college students and professionals to legally do their jobs better, and the other that is used by impoverished people who buy bags containing large quantities of the pure crystalline material and smoke it. So even though they're pharmacologically
Meth or ice versus
Adderall.
Yeah, that's a big topic. Adderall sort of went from 0 to 60. It was sort of nowhere. It was like Adderall, Ritalin, like for ADHD, and then it was everywhere all of a sudden. Adderall, like, and it's still. I mean, it's that's got to be up there with Oxy as an overprescribed drug, no?
That's the fear, I think. But again, I think all this stuff is more a function of the anxieties of a culture than people realize. They always talk about these drug usage patterns as if it's a product of the drug as opposed to a product of the culture.
What's the anxieties of the culture, for example?
Lack of productivity, lack of financial security, feelings of precarity, feelings of striving to maintain some semblance of balance.
And these drugs affect those fears.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you're in a financially precarious position where you're afraid that you don't have health care, you're afraid that you can't pay the rent, and then this drug will give you the power to hustle a little harder, to do a second job, to have a side gig.
Sure.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So or Oxy, where you're just like, everything's fine, everything's great, I feel delightful.
Right. So I think the tendency is always to say that the issue is Oxy or Adderall as opposed to a culture where people feel the need to push themselves in this direction.
Yeah. Well, Oxy being highly addictive.
Yeah.
And Adderall being, I mean, my only real experience with Adderall is everybody I knew was taking it, and everybody at various points has some sort of mental breakdown. It's like sort of maybe Adderall fueled or not, I don't know. Maybe it was just always there and was released. But listen, we still haven't gotten to 3, so we've got a great story in DRC, we've got a good story in South Africa. Oh, we're in 3, we're in 4. So we got the great Ibogaine, which I love. Let's do 5.
Okay, 5.
What was the next one? China?
China.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oof, I can see it in my brain right now. Go into China. And by the way, Tim, we've got to pull up the old documentary for that. I remember just the vats and dirty Chinese factories of making chemicals and you going in and making your own chemical.
To get a first-hand look at the massive scope of production, we headed to China, the manufacturing hub for everything from iPhones to acne medication to synthetic cannabinoids.
I think I went to China for various Vice stories at least 3 times, or 4 times. And from a chemistry perspective, China is the ultimate place to visit. I mean, it's the birthplace of all chemicals. It's the womb of the chemical world.
Also like old school, Chinese medicine, et cetera, et cetera.
There's that too. Yeah, but that's often more naturally.
Yeah, wow, I'm just saying, like, both sides. Keep going.
Yeah, and so I just love Chinese manufacturing. Yeah, it's so interesting.
So tell me about that. So you go to a chemical manufacturing plant in industrial China and said, I'd like you to make me a chemical, please.
Yeah.
Whether it was an amphetamine, psychedelic, or cannabinoid, they were eager to synthesize whatever compound I requested.
They can make it if you want.
I mean, we went to a big thing, again, I'd like to talk more about the kind of freedoms that were afforded at Vice to do certain things. With a lot of drug transfers, like cannabinoids or spice, you look at the way they were being reported in most media outlets, and it was so distorted from reality. It was so distorted that if like a hypothetical extraterrestrial were to read this reporting, they would have no way of even figuring out what was going on. Sure. It's so distorted, it's so non-representative of reality. Yeah. But all about people overdosing and how bad these drugs are, but then why are people using them? Yeah. Why are people buying them? What's even going on? All these fundamental aspects of it were never addressed. And that was, I think, a big part of wanting to cover that, was acknowledging that there were a lot of people that liked those drugs. They were a lot of fun. The reason people were using them was prohibition and drug testing, and this was a way to get high without having your drug use show up on a urine drug screen. And also because they were being made by brilliant chemists in China who were pumping them out, and the chemistry of that was fascinating.
And changing, like, to get by the DEA, or like changing the molecules or something like that. Yeah. So you go there. Yeah. Give me the process. I love this.
Well, so I felt that most of the reporting had been extremely cheesy and negative, and we'd always talk about how dirty these labs are. Oh, these filthy Chinese labs, they're making these evil designer drugs, and no one. Well, it's kind of like going into like a kitchen and starting to criticize the chef because he's a little sauce
I didn't notice. I got a viewer in here.
And I thought, well,
you might have already left.
And it's not really their fault that they're making
these things. Just, feel free to write me up in chat, my guy. I'm just gonna have to change from just chatting to
JWH18.
Illegal, not illegal.
I think podcast.
Oh, we'll make anything. I mean, that's what all chemicals.
It's been a while since I've been on here.
These parts of China.
Podcast.
So the lab that is making synthetic cannabinoid might simultaneously be.
I'm trying to figure out, how to get some
attention
on here right now.
Related, yeah. Bath salts tended to be more stimulant compounds.
Change this
fake weed, /fake coke /fake MDMA.
Yeah, I'm here. Just type to me in chat.
Massive industry.
If you want to talk about whatever.
to the industry,
Sure.
it evolved as all these things do. There were crackdowns in both the United States and China that interfered somewhat with the industry. Of course, people will always find new ways of doing these things. Then there was a legal change with the Farm Bill in the United States that actually